was out walking them and they'd fallen asleep in the stroller, and I walked by a house being built, and I thought, they had a generator going. I thought, oh my gosh, if you wake these babies, I'm going to go postal. And so I kept walking. I thought, why? Why do we use that particular piece of technology, a generator, a gasoline generator? They're really loud, they're heavy, they're super expensive to run on gasoline, and they're absolutely terrible for the environment. So that's where my story began. So in particular, I'm going to talk a bit about this technology versus new technologies and how it's a disruptive technology. So this type of system, we're using them absolutely everywhere. You'd be staggered if you knew. Sorry, I'm starting to hear things. Anyway, we actually use these globally. We actually think of it here almost more construction and recreationally, like going camping and things like that. But in fact, actually in places like Asia, Africa, South America, where the power grid is less reliable than what we are benefited by here in North America, they're used incredibly extensively. So let's talk a little bit about how they're bad polluters. So in North America, Canada and US both, generators are allowed to produce 610 grams of carbon monoxide per kilowatt hour. Kilowatt hour is actually not very much power. That would be running a skill saw for 1 hour, or a microwave for 1 hour, but your toast is way past done at that point. So, but 1 kilowatt hour is actually not a whole lot of power. By contrast, we often think of cars as being such bad polluters, and indeed they are major contributors to greenhouse gas. But we actually have reduced the amount of carbon monoxide that these guys produce rather significantly by the introduction of a catalytic converter. So a catalytic converter in a car reduces the carbon monoxide quite significantly. By contrast, small engines like generators, lawnmowers, things like that, water pumps, these small two-stroke engines are actually really horrific polluters because they don't have that piece of technology in them. So a car, and I chose the Honda Civic simply because it's probably one of the most common cars on the road. This is a gasoline edition, not a hybrid or an electric, and it produces 2.1 grams of carbon monoxide per mile. So let's compare the two. That means the generator running for 1 hour, 1 kilowatt hour, is the same as driving the Honda Civic 3,200 kilometers. 1 hour, 1 generator. If you use that same generator in a work setting where you're working 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, or similar, you're looking at driving the Civic around the world 217 times. That's how much carbon monoxide they output. That's horrifically bad. That's why I say horrific. It is really shockingly bad. So a couple of stats here for you. World Health Organization has estimated the carbon monoxide to be upwards of 2,600 million tons per year. Per year. And that the number one cause of it is the exhaust of internal combustion engines. So you can see why this, as someone who has a background in wanting to have an environmental product, is such a big factor. They're really horrifically bad. So that's what I was getting into. That's what I discovered about generators. What I ended up, and I should also point out the greenhouse gas emissions as well. So that was carbon monoxide. Greenhouse gas-wise, you're looking at, this is from Environment Canada, 2.619 tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year per generator. In Canada alone, we're looking at over 1 million generators in use every year. So you're talking about millions of tons every year. And Canada is actually quite low in terms of the number of generators we have compared to countries like in Northern Africa or throughout Asia, South America, etc. So you can imagine that the overall impact of this type of technology is extremely large. So in came my product. And I'm going to tell you how this all kind of came to be in the process part. This is what I did. I created what would be considered disruptive technology. It's an ultra-portable lithium-ion solar generator that features power stack technology. So what does that mean? Basically, you can stack or swap the batteries as needed. So just the same as with a gasoline option, you could refill a gasoline tank and keep working. In our case, you simply swap batteries or stack them. and work however long you need to work. So just a couple of the related features there. Stack, clip, go is as simple as we can be. You extend runtime based on how many batteries you want to use. You can charge it as you discharge it, so you can charge it with a solar panel or off the wall or other scenarios, and allows you to ideally work indefinitely or play. Another piece to it is around the environmental side of it. We built everything into components so that when a battery comes to the end of its life cycle, you replace only the battery and not the entire unit. So, part of that environmental angle to things. So now let's get to how this relates to disruptive technology and the process of becoming an entrepreneur. So for me, that day after I took that walk began with a lot of market research. I actually started just quite simply talking to people, like talking to a roofer or framer. Well, why do you use a gas generator? Like, what is it about it? And the number one thing that I found in talking to people, and it came up again and again and again, they actually didn't really love the technology. They used it because it met their needs. Their need was to be able to work a potentially indefinite period of time and have power to do so, right? So the problem with any battery solution to date has been that a battery, of course, takes a long time to recharge. Even with the most sophisticated batteries in the world, you're still looking at extended recharge times. So battery systems just weren't a viable option for a lot of people. So even though they didn't like the noise, they knew it was super expensive to run on gas, they really didn't feel like there was an alternative. So my market research began really simply talking to people who used it. Getting on Google, looking at what is out there and what's not out there. Then I kind of started jumping into R&D and testing. So for me, and keep in mind, I was still working full-time this whole process. I was like, there's a gap here. There's a gap in what we're doing, and there's something that needs to be filled. So I still working away at my IT job, and I started doing some R&D and testing, and I was ordering batteries and testing things, and learning a great deal about battery technologies, about electricity in general, soldering pieces together to create larger batteries and connecting inverters. How does it work? How could it work? What does that look like? And I kind of went through that process a lot. I spent a lot of time talking to folks at places like Research Canada. They have a great program called IRAP that was really helpful in terms of providing contacts and information and people to connect with. And that was really where it started to become the next step. So after talking with friends and colleagues who kind of pointed me in this direction or that direction, I had an advisor within the IRAP program, Research Canada, suggest, well, here's an engineering firm you could speak to about making this a commercial product. So I met with that firm here in Edmonton, terrific fellow, and he actually said, well, Connie, what you actually have would be considered disruptive technology. All of the components are known. This is not new engineering in terms of creating an all-new product. What you're doing is taking components like inverters and batteries and various pieces of electronics and combining them into a new product, disruptive technology. He said, what you actually need is an industrial designer. I said, perfect. Do you know any? Nope. Okay, a little bit stumped. I went back to the IRAP advisor and I said, okay, do you know any industrial designers? That's my next step. That's my next step. And he said, no, but I'll check with my colleagues. So he checked and nope, no industrial designers. So meanwhile, I'm Googling and looking around, and what I'm finding is that industrial design is a very vast field, and that a lot of people work in things like building furniture, for example. I needed somebody who specialized in technologies, particularly solar and battery and so forth. So all of this kind of had happened. There was a Friday, I met with the engineering firm, and the following Friday I actually went on a trip with my spouse to meet some friends from high school and their spouses for a getaway weekend. So we flew up to Whistler, and this is one of my favorite parts of the story. The first night I sat down across from my friend Rachel's husband, and I said, Brad, what is it you do for work? And he said, well, I'm an industrial designer. And mostly I work, primarily with solar systems and batteries. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. And it was perfect. It was serendipitous, if you will. So I got to know Brad, and Brad and I developed a working relationship and started to put together a product. So from there, that was the moment that I started to move to actually getting into operations and being a full-time entrepreneur. So a couple months later, I took the leap and I left my job and I started working full-time for myself on the faith and belief that I had something that was special and unique. And some of the things I learned there, first off, was money, 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 and a wee bit more money. There was a lot of things that I learned that if I were talking to somebody today about lessons that I learned and things to do or not do, I'm not sure how much I would change. The reality was there was only certain things that I could have known before. Disruptive technology is something, it's new. I was creating a product that's never been made before. So you couldn't know, Brad or I, or any of the staff that came on after, who helped with this process, we couldn't have known that what the heat temperature was going to spike to within our aluminum heat sink, and were we going to need a fan, and at what temperatures, and how would these pieces connect together. And we tried things and we fixed them, and then we tried new ways and we fixed them. And along that way, you know what, I won't lie, it was a pretty expensive process, but it was an important process, and a process where I learned a lot about who I was, about what I was looking to do with my business, and how to make it all work together. The biggest piece of the process for me, and I think that this is very specific to what's really happening in the future of work, is just learning, learning, learning. Every day I learned a new skill. Something I love that process. I love feeling that every day I'm going to see something new that I haven't seen before. I'm going to learn something about a technology. I'm going to learn something about a business process. I'm going to meet somebody who brings something new to me, to my product, to my business, or just my overall view of the world. So that was a big part of the process for me. So let's talk a little bit more about disruptive technologies in particular. So obviously, as a product, I created what would be considered a disruptive technology. I think we're starting to see more and more of these types of products coming onto the market. And I think that in particular, this is part of where people really play the role in the future of work, as opposed to computers and AI. We know that a computer, and this is me as in putting my IT hat on for a moment, but a computer is input-output. It's on or it's off. They know how to draw perfect lines really well. What they don't necessarily do is add creativity. What I did was create a new picture. I said, well, I see this piece of technology here and this piece of technology here. How can I bring them together? Now, this is something that I think in the future of work we're going to see a lot more of, is individual people who within their roles, within their various careers, have had experiences that have taught them something unique, and being able to create a unique solution that they can then provide to another business, consumer, whatever that case might be. So I actually personally think we're going to see a lot more of individuals selling their expertise. It might be creating a product, it might be creating a special consulting firm that specializes specifically in a particular element of business. It might be an accountant who specializes in how to transition from Dynamics AX accounting system to Great Plains or a different system entirely. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. That's, for me, part of where disruptive technology comes in, not in just a physical product, but in disruptive in terms of how those, what's the best word to put this here, how those various organizations operate and how we look at people. I think we're moving more and more towards that. I also think we're going to see a lot more social media branding and used for branding and connecting. So more and more, and I know Jesse is and Dan both are specialists in this area, but just how much that they now influence what we do and how we connect with each other. It really has changed the game. One of the pieces with that I think is particularly interesting is because of the way that our media is now centered around social media, how Google learns who we are and what we're interested in. Our news, our media, all of these things are actually filtered to that which we already believe. So that brings up a really important question. If we're looking at the future of work and wondering, well, where is my next step? What do I need to do next? I think that part of that is going to be looking outside of those expected results. When I open the news page, I get news that is going to back up that which I already believe. So if I want to create something new, I need to look outside that. And I think that that is a really important part of the future of work in terms of what we're doing, how we're serving our customers, how we're serving organizations we work for, or as entrepreneurs, the services that we create, products we create. Also, obviously, with this, to me, it's about constantly learning. This is where a computer falls short. And we can teach a lot through AI. Google is doing some amazing things with AI, and I think we're going to see a great deal more of it in the coming years. But we are still not at a point where a computer is going to go through the process I did. Right? I look at stuff and I find myself thinking, I think in disruptive technology all the time. So I look at, for example, an electric vehicle, and I think, well, what if we combine some of what they do in trains? There's a type of train that's a tilting train. So it actually tilts as it goes around the corner so that the passenger doesn't feel that pull. Well, that's an interesting combination, but a computer won't look to a train system to solve an electric vehicle problem. This is the kind of area where I think that people really get involved, where people really bring something unique and special to the table that as professionals in particular, we bring back to the organizations we work for or create new organizations entirely. Other things that really have changed the game, for me in particular, were things like 3D printing. So I actually used a 3D print to create the prototype for my original Grengen unit. Grengen, by the way, is just green engine. So if you're looking for it, pretty simple and straightforward. But basically, I was able to use a 3D print to be able to create something here now at a much lower cost than what we might have been looking at 20 years ago. Those types of technologies are making it easier and easier for people to get into trying things out on their own and without necessarily as high a cost. There's software that allows you to create software. You can go on and use software that will help you create an app that you can sell on an iPhone. And you can do that today, and you don't have to be a computer programmer. So for me, I think that process of finding the gaps, learning, and getting in there, disruptive technology plays a really major part. That was the end of my actual presentation. I hope that there's lots of discussion here because I think that it's a topic that is very wide open. I'd like to say thank you, of course, to the sponsors of our meetup here, Go Productivity, ATB Entrepreneur Center, Fontes Environmental Corp, and, oh, wait, me. We provided the snack, so enjoy some muffins and stuff. That's the best part, right? So that's the end of my official presentation, but I really think this is a wonderful topic, and I'm really curious what people have to share or if they have questions.
So we've got about 15 minutes for questions, so you've got to speak loudly so we can hear you. So go ahead.
All right, I'm trying to speak loudly. So what's your competition out in the world?
You know what? Zero. Yeah, right now, battery systems would be considered a solar generator. We're, in fact, a battery system. Right now, there are solar generators or battery systems, but nobody has a replaceable battery. Everybody out there currently in the marketplace has an enclosed battery unit, which means to service the battery, you must send it into the manufacturer or buy an entire second unit to daisy chain them together, which, of course, doubles your cost. So currently we have a patent pending on our power stack technology. We are the only people in the world doing it. And interestingly, when you talk about opportunity, I don't even think I could have began to estimate just how big this opportunity was because nobody had done it before. Since we've launched, we started our pre-sales a couple of months ago. And in that time, I mean, just this week, I've gotten calls from Nigeria, somebody looking to distribute there. I've had a couple from Brazil, a couple from Uganda, Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand. I don't advertise in any of these places. These are people who are looking for a solution. So I was at a trade show recently, the Empton Sportsman show, and somebody came around the corner and went, "I've been looking everywhere for you." And he's like, I didn't know you, but you are who I've been looking for. And he was building basically a fly-in resort. And he said, the cost of bringing gasoline in to any kind of a fly-in location to run a generator for water pumps and things like that was an enormous cost. He's like, you are exactly what I've been looking for. And I get that actually quite a lot. So it's been a really interesting thing of finding that, where are the gaps? Where are the gaps in the marketplace that you can fill that provide something unique? So it's been kind of interesting that way.
So Connie, you mentioned a little bit about, I made that step out the door. Tell us a little bit more about that in terms of what support did you have to do that? You talked a little bit about money and how important that was. What about family life? What about the other people that were involved? Tell us about those people.
You know what, great question. Quite frankly, the reason overall that I do everything is my family, and they've been unbelievably supportive in all of this. And that's really what made it possible for me. So my wife is actually pregnant with our third, so I carried the boys. Now it's her turn. And she is just like, knowing how much of a risk we are taking, she still approaches it as, I trust you, please don't tell me the details, it'll stress me. And she's been amazing. My family has been amazing. There hasn't been funding. Up to this point, we have received no grants, no funding of any kind. I still hope that we'll be able to do that because we do bring something to the marketplace that is incredibly environmentally friendly. It's completely emission-free. Which means that it can have an enormous impact. But to this point, to be honest, like in terms of the money, like one of the things that was a real challenge, I hoped we would get funding earlier in some way to kind of help us make that step. But it hasn't been until now, as we're starting to get more media and more interest. I was recently just filmed for the Dragon's Den. Well, now people are interested. Now people are calling saying, oh, well, yeah, let's talk. The first time I tried to talk to one of the funding agencies, and I won't actually say the name because I don't in any way want to disparage someone, but the couple of people I met with said, well, I can't really see a market for your product. And said, but we could sell you some market research to tell you that. And I was, well, I don't have any money to begin with. I came looking for money, and they didn't even see the potential value. Well, now I got to tell you, I get probably every single show I go to, probably 6, 7 or more requests for investment, because the number of people who see the value in it is through the roof. But it took a long time to break through that part. That was something I didn't anticipate. That was part of the reason why it ended up costing me quite a bit more money on the startup than I had hoped, because I thought, well, we have this great environmental product, and we're going to get some support, and people are going to want this. But honestly, it was the individual consumers and not the funding agencies who saw the value and where we were going. And that was something that was definitely a big eye-opener for me. Again, I'm not sure I would do anything differently. It's been an amazing journey, but it was definitely a lot of learning involved as well.
I was listening to them talk about you on CBC Radio the other day.
On CBC?
Yeah, it was on CBC. It was a cabin show or something. Talking about Connie Stacey and how everybody wants to make their cabins greener. I guess that explains why you were talking.
Wow. I knew I was on City TV. I didn't know I was on CBC.
Well, I listen to CBC Radio all the time. So.
Wow.
So they were talking about you in conjunction with a lot of people who want to make their cabins greener and their homes and their getaway places. And I was wondering about the urban market.
Oh.
If that gap.
One of the things that with the type of product I make in particular, Because we're emission-free, we actually have a much bigger market than just the standard generator because we can run inside. So for one, I go to a trade show, I don't pay for power, I bring power. And the first time I did that, the first show I went to with my Grengen and hooked everything up, the show tech people came by and they said, "You owe us for power, you're clearly using power." I said, "No, I don't, I brought my own." And she just looked at it and went, "You're gonna put us out of business," and walked away. And I was like, yes, I am. But also other things. So like in terms of urban, one of the biggest areas is home backup. Particularly with an aging population, we have more and more people who are getting home care within their home as opposed to going directly to an assisted living scenario. But if you have a CPAP machine, an oxygen machine, kidney dialysis, power outage is not a possibility. It literally can be life-threatening. So now all of a sudden you have a system that you can actually use as an uninterrupted power supply inside your home. So you plug your oxygen machine into the Grengen into the wall. If the power goes out, fine, it'll draw from the battery system until the power is restored. In other areas where weather becomes an even bigger factor, I'm originally from the East Coast. I'm from Newfoundland. That's why I have such a great sense of humor. Nobody even commented on the shirt. I mean, come on. In your heads. So anybody who's in Canada knows the famous stories of the amount of snowfall we can get on the East Coast. So they all have generators because of the number of power outages. And, you know, as my cousin said one time quite succinctly, someone could sneeze in St. John's and the power would go out in Clarenville. So they've all got generators. But when there's 6 feet of snow, good luck getting to the shed. And then you got to hope that you've got gasoline and everything's been well maintained to start it. This type of system can be kept in the house. You don't have to worry about any kind of emission. So like in terms of other markets, like urban, for example, it's through the roof. We actually, in the long term, I'm hoping that we'll be expanding into other areas like helping people get off grid. So I have a little bit of a rough design on basically being able to connect our system right into your home network so that basically you draw from our batteries until you're past the battery point and then drawing from the grid and balancing it out. So similar to like the way the Powerwall works, but in individual components as opposed to an enclosed system. The one problem with an enclosed system like that is, say, 7 years, your battery comes to the end of the lifespan, you have to recycle everything. So the electronics, the inverter, charge controller, all of those things have to be recycled, but they're probably not at the end of their life cycle. So instead I do everything in component. I also actually have already designed our next step. So the batteries are actually the center of my business. So the detachable batteries also fit on the other products I've already designed, including a lawnmower and a water pump and things like that. So small engines. As a friend of mine said, I feel like I should get a cape when I say this, but she said, I'm saving the world one stinking combustion engine at a time. So that's kind of a little bit of the focus for my business, but the opportunity to expand is indefinite. Indefinite. I don't yet. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just wondering if you could talk more about how it relates to the disruptive technologies part and how that will affect work in the future. So how will these kind of inventions and innovations change the way we work?
Well, and there's actually, that's a really good point, is this type of product is very much targeted at another type of change, and that's our portability. We demand mobility. We need to be able to work or live on the go anytime, anywhere. And that's what I partially service with this type of product. But I think in the bigger scene, I think that there's going to be a lot more niche products, or they might start as niche, that are really going to boom. And a lot of it will be about being able to allow people to transition from work to pleasure anywhere, anytime, to be able to do what they do no matter where you are. I think that's something that we're right on the cusp of. And I'm sure there are lots of minds here who are already thinking about how they might service that market. And please do. I think that's where we're going. But that type of change in technology is really, really opening up opportunities in the marketplace, I think, because somebody who can help you do your job anywhere at any time, that's a game changer. That's a game changer. Yeah, well, you know, we had a company out of Brazil contact us that were looking to order our product because they were actually, I thought this was a great future of work piece as well. They're actually working with nightclubs there where they have a lot of nightclubs that during the day these facilities are completely empty. And so they want to transform them into workplaces so that basically they wanted to use my system to be able to put power at these tables throughout these buildings that during the day you could go in and be your entrepreneur. You didn't have to have your own office. You didn't have to have all of these things. These nightclubs that were only occupied at nighttime would transition into business offices for any variety of entrepreneur. So I thought that was a great example of, you know, how some people are already looking at that change. And this is a great example here with the ATB Center. I mean, an entrepreneur, whether I believe you're a business client of ATB's or not, can come in here and work and use some of the facilities. That's fantastic. That's forward thinking.
I'm wondering how adaptable your technology is. You mentioned lawnmowers and immediately thought two-stroke. Just can't stand two-stroke like that.
I know.
Or just that I can't stand the stink coming off the
Yeah, absolutely. So.
But one of the things that hit my head was I was in Asia and two-stroke engines are everywhere. And I'm
Yep.
specifically thinking of my experience in Phnom Penh, and I could barely breathe because you just think of Jasper having just waves. You couldn't cross the road. Waves of two-stroke, little engines.
Yeah.
And so I don't know exactly how much power it generates, but it seems to me for two-stroke you're kind of moving in on the Elon Musk territory, and so
Sort of.
And I think it's a really good thing. So my question really is this adaptable to a little engine?
Yes. Basically, we can already, so one of the things I was actually planning with is planning for the next step in battery technology. So the way I design my system, I'm just going to jump back to the picture because it might make it easier. So this battery pack itself, the way it clips on, it's a fully separate unit that can operate with the inverter charge controller piece on top or without. So I could connect this to, assuming I had the right connection connectors, cords and so forth, I could connect that in place of pretty much any 12-volt battery, lead acid battery. I also designed it so that basically, personally, I think that graphene is going to surpass lithium ion as the next super battery. I can make the same battery packs with graphene in them, and as long as I maintain my voltage, you'll change nothing. So now I'll just start making the same battery packs. Instead of being 100 amp hours, they'll be 120 amp hours, and they'll be made with graphene. And nobody changes anything. So it serves both the advancement in technology, helps me stay on top of being an innovator in this field, but also serves the client better or customer better, and serves the environment better. So that's kind of where we're going with it. I can do a song and dance.
Connie, I have another question.
Sure.
During college life over the weekend, this woman who came up was an electrical engineer, one that was becoming an electrician. She started talking about how in the future there's going to be conflict between these kind of innovations and the grid. And then it's going to cause she talked about a social war. And I thought maybe, is she kind of crazy, or is this, when you talk about disruptive technologies, are we going to disrupt the social structure of it? Are we going to disrupt sort of the fact that there was, some companies have control over power?
Well,
will that kind of get in your face and cause some kind of conflict?
I think there's a couple of things there. One, I think you're talking a little bit in terms of the social part about what Rob talked about last time with the fourth turning, how there is a societal change that comes as well, and history has shown us that. And I think that's part of it. I think we're on that gap. I know Rob could probably answer that a little more succinctly. But I think, yes, there is the societal piece to it. And you're right, absolutely. I'm somebody who probably wouldn't be looked upon too favorably by EPCOR. But at the same time, if EPCOR is smart, EPCOR will look to groups like me, whether me personally or other, to see how they can innovate and make themselves that continued service. Because mobility will be everything. Mobility really is our lifestyle. That's how it has gone. That's how it's going to continue to go. Places like Africa, Asia, South America, where the grid is weak, instead of strengthening the grid, we will strengthen our ability to be mobile. With that as well, in terms of the overall grid, one of the things I was recently invited, I was really happy to attend this electric vehicle workshop with the city of Edmonton. And they were talking about, well, how do we plan for this? We know that more electric vehicles are going to be coming into the city. How do we plan for this and the charging of them? And there were people there from EPCOR and talking about, right now, if you're in some of the older parts of town, the transformers actually can't handle more than 1 to 2 electric cars plugged in without blowing the transformer. So they're already looking at major changes to be able to support that technology. So it'll be really interesting to see how they respond, because power is something we absolutely have to have. And I really do believe that mobility is the solution that we are as consumers are looking for. So we'll see what they do. Sorry, go ahead.
In terms of the future of work, two-part question. So if more people like yourself are moving out into an entrepreneurial area, will you be hiring people in the future? And if so, what types of things would people need to prepare for in order to make that transition from working for a corporation to working for an entrepreneur?
That's a really interesting point, because one of the things that I've really learned in this last few years as I kind of went through this process and started hiring staff was just how important it was to me, not the credentials that someone had, but how fast they could learn. Because what we do changes every single day. There's something new, and being able to bring on people who had that energy, enthusiasm, and were keen to learn new things, well, that changes everything. I mean, one of the first people, and I was sad to see her go, we had someone who left for personal reasons, but one of our staff was a plumber, and she had become social marketing, and she was darn good at it. And so it was more about finding individuals who had that interest to learn new things and had an aptitude for it than it was about a credential. Credentials got you the interview, but it was the attitude that gets you the job. And regardless of the future of work, I've always believed that to be true. And sorry, what was the second part to your question?
What can people do to prepare themselves to work for an entrepreneur versus working for a corporation?
That's a good question. Personally, I think that, understanding and doing a little bit of research about what it is the company does, as opposed to just, I'm an accountant, here's my resume, I can come and do accounting for you. But understanding the particulars of the business is probably the best part, because it does change every day. What I do today won't be the same as I do tomorrow. I kind of joke about this, but I can always tell the type of day I had based on when I get home and I empty my pockets, what's in my pockets. So I remember coming home one day and I was, a stack of business cards from meetings and stuff. And then the next day I come home and I have lithium-ion 18650 cells, 6 screws of different sizes, some soldering wire, and I don't know, I can't remember, was something else, a pocket full of change or something. I was like, how was this today and this was yesterday? It changes so frequently, so quickly. So it's been an adventure. But in terms of your question, I really think it's about understanding the particular business, because business is just changing. I had a meeting just this morning with 2 amazing people who work for the city and talking about some of the challenges that they face in their role, where you're talking about obviously more bureaucracy around any kind of a government or municipality or education system, and how that impacts the ability to bring new ideas forward, because that may be at least traditionally, a little more difficult to make changes in, or at least quick changes, as compared to a for-profit business. For-profit business is always quicker to go, I can make money there, I'm going to make that change. Government requires a lot more, because of course they're accountable to people, so they have to really be careful about dotting I's and crossing T's. So it was really interesting to talk about some of the challenges that they face in what they do.
Excellent. We have time for one more quick question, and then we'll wrap it up.
You're talking about battery.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading about And in terms of if everybody suddenly went to battery power, well, in terms of building a battery and materials, is that going to create a demand, or is there a shortage? Is there the ability to ramp up?
You know what, you're so on the right train of thought there. So right now, most everything is, our super battery that we typically use in most scenarios is lithium based. Lithium, there is a limited amount of supply, and it comes from a couple of large mines, almost exclusively. Now there is a problem there, because as we move to more and more demand on batteries, will we have enough supply? And will whoever owns that bit of lithium, those sources become the controllers of all things that move forward? I actually think the answer is no, because one of the things that's happening, and I love that this is happening in Alberta, is one of the places, but we're working on something called graphene. Well, graphene is a carbon derivative. It is more energy dense than lithium, and more available. So now you take Alberta for a second here. Perfect example. We are creating carbon, and people are very upset with us for creating too much carbon. Well, here's a battery technology that we can create that uses carbon, so kind of levels that field, and is going to be, I think, the most in-demand battery material in the coming years. So if anybody's looking for investment stuff, look at graphene. I'm a big believer in this. They actually, there's a group, I think Rob mentioned, that's actually scraping the lining of eggshells to get the material to create graphene. And this stuff is environmentally friendly. It can be created anywhere. It's not a limited resource like so many other of the materials we use. So environmentally, it has tons of options. In terms of production, is wonderful because it's not centered in any one area of the world. So that's kind of a really interesting piece. One of the things that's really neat with it too is they actually, like, there's research going on all over the world with this stuff, by the way. So they're putting it in supercapacitors and putting it into EVs for braking capacity, like to regain energy on the braking of electric vehicles. They're using it. One company put a layer of it on solar panels and found that they'll collect energy in the rain. They're using it in so many different scenarios. So you're right. The real question there, though, is if things are becoming mobile and we have to be able to take energy with us, that means some type of a battery. So what happens there? What's the technology that's going to win the day or carry the day? And when's it going to change? Because it will keep changing. And there's already talk about a solid-state lithium, also a possibility. I think it's a little bit further out, but who knows?
Thank you, Connie. So thanks for coming out today. Our next meetup is, Catherine, what's the date of the next meetup? Is it June 6th or June 10th?
I'll just confirm that before I give you the wrong answer.
But our next meetup will be on analytics, data analytics, and how it affects the work environment with Dan Haight from Dark Horse Analytics here in Calgary. Talking about how that particular technology has impacted our lives, as well as helped him move from being an IT world into entrepreneur as well. So please check us out on Facebook, join us, and you'll see some of this material. That's really cool.
I want Dan to turn me off so that he can